Tolerance is not absolute, and when left unchecked, it doesn't lead to peace, but to collapse. That's the paradox no one talks about. The more you allow in the name of virtue, the faster your clarity begins to blur. You were told to keep your mind open, to let everything in, but no one warned you that open doors invite shadows, that some ideas, like parasites, burrow deep, not to teach, but to undo. In the name of tolerance, you made space for the very voices that silence truth. In the name of growth, you softened every edge until your convictions bled out. This is how clarity dies, not with violence, but with the gentle erosion of your own certainty. First, in ideology, then in memory. Principles once firm twist under pressure, decisions once clear blur under loneliness. You start to wonder, was I wrong? Was I too harsh? Should I go back? But no, you weren't wrong. You were right then. And if you don't protect that moment of clarity, the past will be rewritten by present hunger. This isn't just a lesson in groupthink, it's a reckoning with your own mind. The contradiction has already entered. But now comes the real question. Will you close the gate? An open gate doesn't just welcome light, it welcomes everything. And in the name of goodness, you let it all in. Ideologies wrapped in kindness, opinions forged in grievance, the dissonant hum of opposing truths, all granted equal ground. You thought this was compassion, you thought this was growth, but soon the air grew thick, voices clashed like storms, and something sacred inside began to tremble. Because not everything that knocks deserves entry. Not every voice speaks truth. But when you flatten every shape into sameness, when you no longer discriminate between signal and noise, you lose more than peace. You lose your compass. And so the world begins to tilt. Morality becomes a house with no walls, and inside your certainty, with its hard-earned bones, is slowly stripped for parts. The gate is open, but is the keeper still awake? They called it a virtue, tolerance without end. But virtues unguarded become weapons turned inward. You built a house with no locks, invited all to sit, and expected peace to bloom. Yet, soon, the intolerant claimed the chairs, rewrote the rules, and spat poison in the well. You watched, frozen by principle, as the very thing you built crumbled. Because tolerance is not a halo, it is a pact, a social contract, one that says you are safe here so long as you do not endanger others. But when that line is crossed, when harm is cloaked in belief, tolerance must become iron, not rage, not hate, but boundary. Without it, a garden becomes overrun, not by growth, but by rot. You thought tolerance meant letting everyone stay, but true tolerance means knowing when to ask someone to leave. Now the collapse turns inward. At first it was ideological, but now it lives in you. You once made a decision, clear, deliberate, necessary. You left someone behind. You walked away from a path, a person, a place. And at the time, you knew why. But time is not kind to memory. It softens the edges. It blurs the pain. It whispers, maybe you were wrong. And here's the tragedy. Not that you changed, but that your clarity was slowly unstitched by need. Loneliness, boredom, regret. These are not feelings. They are thieves, and their favorite target is truth. So you return to the scene not as the judge, but as the accused. You question what was once certain. You rewrite the script to ease the ache. And before long, the gate swings open again. This time not to ideology, but to illusion. What if the voice telling you to go back isn't you? Memory is not a mirror, it is a painter. An emotion holds the brush. You remember the warmth, not the wound, the laughter, not the silence. You edit the past not to deceive, but to survive, because the present is heavy and certainty is a weight. Nostalgia offers something easier, a revision, soft and golden, where the reasons for your choices vanish into fog. But the danger is this: when memory is rewritten by mood, it ceases to be a guide. It becomes propaganda. The mind, under pressure, becomes its own saboteur, justifying return trips to places you fled for good reason. We call it growth. We call it forgiveness. But sometimes it's just surrender. And if you follow the siren song of revision, you may find yourself living in the ruins you once escaped, telling yourself it's a second chance, when it's just the same prison, with different curtains. Not all harm screams. Some simply stays. A look, a tone, a quiet erosion of your values over time. These don't strike like storms. They settle like dust. And without boundaries, that dust becomes sediment, shaping who you are when no one's watching. The soft harm of compromise. The quiet violence of doubt. This is how the self is worn down, not by force, but by slow forgetting. You think you're adapting, being flexible, just trying again. But what if what you're really doing is dissolving? There comes a moment when self-preservation looks like defiance, when saying no sounds cruel, when drawing a line feels like betrayal. But this is where the real clarity lives, in the willingness to disappoint others to stay true to yourself. Because if you do not define the borders of your identity, someone else will, and they will redraw them in the shape of their comfort, not your truth. The mind is a temple, but without a priest at the gate, it becomes a marketplace, open to every whisper, every peddler of comfort, every illusion dressed as truth. Here lies the paradox. You wanted peace, so you welcomed everything. You wanted certainty, so you questioned nothing. But now, your peace is pierced by contradiction, and your certainty has become a stranger to you. What began as inclusion became infection. What began as reflection became recursion. And in the echo chamber of your thoughts, you hear two voices, one from the past, resolute and clear, another from the present, aching and afraid. Which one is truth? Which one is survival? Only by standing at the gate again, fully awake, eyes open, sword drawn, can you decide, not based on how you feel, but on what you knew before the storm began. The reckoning is near. Now you understand. Open-mindedness is not the absence of judgment. Tolerance is not the erasure of boundaries. Clarity does not come from accepting everything. It comes from protecting what matters. You must become the keeper of your gate, to let in only what aligns and send away what corrodes, to trust the version of yourself that made the hard decision when the fog was thinner, when the sky was clearer, when the cost of compromise hadn't yet stolen your spine. Because not all pain means you were wrong, not all doubt deserves a hearing, and not every invitation should be accepted. This is the quiet power of discernment, not loud, not proud, but unshakable. You do not owe your past an apology. You owe your future a guardian. The contradiction has already entered. Now, it is your task to choose. Will you rewrite truth for comfort, or hold the line for clarity? The gate is still open, but this time, you hold the key. You thought this was about being fair, about staying kind, about giving every voice a place in your mind, every doubt a second chance. But it was never about kindness. It was about coherence. It was about truth. And now you see the cost of letting everything in, your judgment, hollowed by nostalgia, your beliefs, diluted by contradiction. This was never about the group. Not really. It was about the fragile gate between your clarity and your craving, about how easy it is to confuse openness with wisdom, and how fast wisdom dies when you forget to choose. You weren't meant to be endlessly receptive. You were meant to discern. The lesson was never tolerance. It was trust. Trust in what you once knew, when the sky was clear and your hands were steady. That is the truth the storm tried to bury. Now the path bends inward. The open gate, the dissolved boundaries, the fading clarity, these were not failures. They were initiations. Through them, you witnessed the slow undoing of your own mind by voices you once welcomed. You watched the collapse of a group mirror, the collapse of certainty. But in that collapse, something ancient stirred. The realization that truth does not keep itself. You are the keeper now. This is your invitation, not to close your mind, but to guard it, not to shut the world out, but to ask better questions of it. The next decision you face, the next temptation to reopen what you already closed, meet it not with doubt, but remembrance. What you knew then is still true. It simply needs you to speak for it. So step forward, not softer, not smaller, but sharper, as the gatekeeper, as the threshold. And now, let the silence return. Not the silence of uncertainty, but the stillness after thunder, the quiet that follows when the storm has spoken and the gate has held. In that silence, you remember who you were before the erosion, before the revision, before you doubted what you already knew. This is your moment of clarity reclaimed. Let others call it cold. Let them say you've changed. But you know the truth. Clarity is not cruelty. Boundaries are not betrayal. And open-mindedness is not infinite. It is chosen. It is earned. And it is yours to wield. The contradiction entered once. Let it enter no more. Close the gate, hold the key, and walk forward as the one who did not forget.